Okay, so you want to own a yacht. Find a beautiful boat, hire a captain, keep it somewhere warm, and step aboard whenever the mood strikes you. You already know exactly what it looks like. Teak decks going warm under bare feet at 9 in the morning, a tender dropping you into a cove off Sardinia that has no road running to it. A crew who learned how you take your coffee on the second day and never had to ask again. Dinner on the aft deck while the lights come up behind Portofino, and sitting in the back of your mind, the sentence every broker says within 10 minutes of meeting you. When you're not using her, you charter her out, and she helps pay for herself. Here's the strange part. Almost nobody who owns one of these boats is actually in the yacht business. The money in this industry is enormous, and it is astonishingly reliable, and almost none of it ends up with the person whose name sits on the registry. In this arrangement, the owner is not the investor. The owner is the raw material. Let's start with what you think you're buying. Take a 50-meter yacht, about 164 feet. That's the size that reads as serious in a Mediterranean anchorage without reading as a head of state. New from a European yard, that boat costs somewhere between $30 and $45 million. Use 35 million as your working number. Now understand that 35 million is not a price. It is a deposit on a relationship. If you build new, you don't hand over money once. You sign a contract with a yard, Feedship, Lursen, Benetti, Amels, Ocean Co., the names that show up in the same 20 magazines, and you pay in tranches tied to milestones. Something on signature, something at keel laying, something when the hull is closed, something when the engines drop in, something at launch, and the balance at delivery. That schedule runs 30 to 42 months on a boat this size. 3 years where you own an asset that does not exist yet and cannot be used, insured as a finished vessel, or sold at anything close to what you've put in. During those 3 years, you're also paying people who are not the yard. An exterior designer takes a fee, a naval architect takes a fee, an interior designer takes a fee, and interior is where budgets actually detonate, because stone, veneer, and custom joinery are priced per boat, not per catalogue. You hire an owner's representative, a project manager, whose entire job is to stand in a shipyard in Holland or Italy and make sure the boat being built is the boat you signed for. That person costs $200,000 a year and is the best money in the whole build, because without them, the yard resolves every ambiguity in the yard's favor. Then there are the escalation clauses. Steel, aluminum, and the euro all move over 3 years, and the contract says, who eats that movement? Usually you do, above a threshold. So call the real delivered cost of a $35 million boat closer to 39 or 40. That's before the boat has done anything. Buying used looks smarter, and this is where the first trap opens. A 10-year-old 50-meter in good condition sells for roughly half what a comparable new one costs. That looks like a spectacular discount. It isn't a discount, it's a schedule. The reason that boat is priced at half is that the market has already counted what's coming. A 5-year class survey, a paint job that's due, engine overhauls at their hour limits, and electronics that were designed before the current decade. The seller isn't giving you $17 million. The seller is handing you a work order and subtracting the estimated cost from the sticker. Buyers who don't understand that pay full price for the boat and then pay again for the work the discount was supposed to cover. Financing behaves differently too, and it tells you exactly how professionals view this asset. A marine mortgage on a yacht typically runs 50 to 60% loan to value, amortized over 12 to 15 years at a rate meaningfully above what the same borrower gets on real estate. Lenders price 3 things into that. The collateral loses value every single year. The collateral can be moved to a jurisdiction where repossessing it is a lawsuit rather than a phone call, and there's no deep market to dump it into if you stop paying. Banks aren't confused about what a yacht is. They just charge accordingly. Now, here's the other side of the ledger, and this is the part that actually decides whether owning a boat is survivable. There's a rule of thumb in this industry that annual running cost is about 10% of purchase price. It's crude, and it's close enough to be dangerous because people hear it and don't do the multiplication. 10% of $35 million is $3.5 million a year, every year. That's the operating cost of a mid-sized company, and it exists to move one family around the Mediterranean for a few weeks. Start with the crew, because the crew is the real boat. A 50-meter yacht runs 12 to 14 full-time crew. A captain on that size vessel earns somewhere between $160,000 and $220,000 a year. The chief engineer is $140,000. A good chef is $100,000 to $130,000, and a good chef is not optional, because the chef is the single most complained about position in yachting. Chief stewardess, $80,000. Deckhands and junior stews, $45,000 to $55,000 each. First officer, second engineer, bosun, and so on down the list. Then add rotation. Senior crew on a boat that runs a full season don't work 12 months straight anymore. The market won't allow it. 2 on, 2 off rotation for the captain and the engineer means you're paying for 2 captains and 2 engineers to fill 1 captain's chair and 1 engine room. That's not inefficiency. That's the price of keeping people who won't quit in August. On top of salaries, flag state social contributions, crew medical and repatriation insurance, uniforms, flights home, ongoing certification and training, placement agency fees, and food for the crew mess, which is a real line item when you're feeding 13 people 3 meals a day, 365 days a year. Call it $1.5 million annually, all in. Here's the thing nobody explains to you about that number. It is not a function of use. The boat does not carry a payroll because you're aboard. It carries a payroll because it exists. A yacht sitting on a berth in Antibes in February with nobody on board still has a captain, still has an engineer, still has crew running systems, still generates that $1.5 million. Your calendar has nothing to do with it. Fuel is next, and fuel is misunderstood in an interesting direction. At a displacement cruising speed of 11 or 12 knots, a 50-meter burns roughly 250 to 350 liters an hour. A busy Mediterranean season is maybe 400 engine hours, so 120,000 liters, and at current marine gas oil prices, that's around $150,000. That's smaller than people expect. What people don't expect is the generators. A yacht at anchor is a floating hotel with full air conditioning, refrigeration, water makers, laundry, and lighting, and none of that runs on ocean breeze. The gensets run 24 hours a day, whether the boat is moving or not, whether guests are aboard or not, burning 60 to 100 liters an hour, which means the boat burns fuel all night while you sleep in a hotel ashore. Over a year, hotel load can quietly exceed propulsion. Dockage is where the Mediterranean sends you a bill for geography. A 50-meter berth in a prime port in high season runs 2,000 to 4,000 euros a night, and prime ports in August are not negotiating with you. Shoulder season and winter contracts bring the average way down, but a realistic annual berthing figure for a boat working the Med-summer and the Caribbean winter lands between $300,000 and $450,000. Monaco during the Grand Prix is its own universe and shouldn't be used for planning purposes, only for understanding that berths are priced by scarcity, not by service. Insurance runs roughly 0.5% to 0.9% of hull value. So, $250,000 on our boat, and that's just hull and machinery. Liability cover is separate. Crew cover is separate. If your itinerary includes certain waters, war risk cover is separate again. And it's priced by an underwriter reading the news. Then there's the paperwork layer, which is invisible until you're in it. Flag registration, annual class surveys, radio and tonnage certificates, safety equipment servicing on fixed intervals. Every life raft, every extinguisher, every EPIRB has an expiry date and a certified technician attached to it. Almost every owner hires a yacht management company to run all of it, plus payroll, plus accounting, plus purchasing for $60,000 to $120,000 a year, which is genuinely good value, and which is also another person earning a stable annual fee off your depreciating boat. Now, the yard, because the yard is where the money actually goes. Every year, the boat comes out of the water for anti-foul, anodes, running gear, and whatever the survey found. Call it $150,000 to $250,000 and 3 to 5 weeks. Every 6 to 8 years, the boat needs a full repaint, because super yacht paint is a cosmetic system that degrades on a schedule, and a 50-meter repaint runs $800,000 to $1.5 million and takes 3 to 5 months in a shed. Teak decks last 10 to 15 years and cost $500,000 to $1 million to replace. Main engine overhauls arrive on our counters. Stabilizers, thrusters, water makers, and air conditioning chillers all have their own life cycles, and none of them are synchronized with each other. And then the toys, which nobody budgets honestly. A 10-meter limousine tender is a $600,000 boat with its own engines, its own service schedule, and its own insurance. There's usually a second tender, a couple of jet skis, a dive compressor, and a garage full of equipment that lives in salt air. Everything on a yacht is a smaller yacht. Averaged across a decade, capital maintenance on this vessel is $600,000 to $800,000 a year. It doesn't arrive evenly. It arrives in years where you write a $2 million check and don't see the boat until July. So far, ownership sounds like a machine that consumes money. It is. And this is exactly the moment where the broker mentions charter. Let's do that math properly, because it's the single most persuasive and most misleading number in the entire industry. A 50-meter yacht with a good crew and a decent refit history charters in the Mediterranean for something like €250,000 a week. That's the headline rate, and it's real. Multiply it out, and the fantasy assembles itself instantly. 20 weeks a year, and the boat pays for itself twice over. The boat will not do 20 weeks. A well-managed, well-marketed, popular charter yacht does 8 to 12 weeks a year. Many do 4 to 6. The Mediterranean season is roughly May to September. The Caribbean season is December to March, and moving between them costs you 2 ocean crossings and several weeks of unsellable calendar. So take 10 weeks. €2.5 million gross. Off the top, the charter broker takes 15%. That's standard. It's not negotiable in practice, and it's split between the central agent who markets your boat and the retail broker who brought the client. You're at $2.1 million. Now understand the APA, because this is where owners hallucinate profit. The advance provisioning allowance is an additional 25 to 35% of the charter fee that the guest pays before boarding. It looks like revenue. It is not revenue in any sense. It's the guest's money, held by the captain, spent on the guest's fuel, the guest's food, the guest's wine, the guest's dockage, and refunded if unspent. Not €1 of APA is yours. Then subtract what chartering actually costs you. Crew on a charter boat are paid more because charter work is relentless, and the good ones can choose. Guest tips run 5 to 15% of the charter fee and go entirely to the crew, which is correct, and which is also money passing through your boat that never touches your ledger. Charter weeks accelerate wear on everything: interiors, tenders, toys, deck finishes, pulling refit spending forward by years. Your insurance is rated higher for commercial operation, and charters starting in EU waters attract VAT at the local rate, which in Italy or France means 20 to 22% applied to that headline fee. Run all of it through, and a genuinely successful 10-week charter season contributes something like 1.2 to 1.4 million euros against annual costs approaching $4 million. Charter doesn't pay for the boat. Charter reimburses roughly a third of it. And here's what that third costs you in the currency you actually bought the boat for. The weeks that charter for the highest rates are exactly the weeks you want: August in the Med, Christmas and New Year in the Caribbean, the week of the Cannes Festival, the week of the Monaco Grand Prix. A boat that earns is a boat that is booked precisely when the dream is at its most vivid. You will find yourself in a villa on land, looking at your own yacht in the bay, occupied by strangers who are paying you less than it costs to have it there. Now, here's the trap almost nobody sees coming, and it's not financial at all. It's a number stamped on a certificate. Gross tonnage is not weight. It's a measure of a vessel's enclosed volume converted by formula into a single figure, and international maritime regulation uses that figure as a threshold. Cross 500 gross tons and the yacht steps out of the light touch regime and into the world of the international conventions, the safety management code, the security code, the full SOLAS apparatus. That means a documented safety management system, external audits, higher minimum manning, more certification for senior crew, and a permanent compliance workload. This is why an enormous number of yachts are built at 499 gross tons. Not 400, 499. Designers spend months shaving enclosed volume to sit 1 ton under a line that has nothing to do with how the boat sails. The consequence for you as a buyer is brutal in one direction. Going bigger is not a smooth curve where more boat costs proportionally more money. There is a cliff. Step over it and annual operating cost jumps 30 to 50% for a boat that may only be a few meters longer, and the pool of future buyers narrows sharply because most private owners who could afford the purchase do not want the regulatory regime. There's a similar step at 24 meters load line, lower down the market, where an entire tier of code requirements switches on. The lengths that look like natural progressions in a brochure are separated by regulatory walls in real life. Then there's tax, which behaves like weather. EU VAT on importing a yacht runs roughly 20 to 22% of value. On a $35 million boat, that's $7 million, and it is a real, payable, enforced number. The standard way around it for non-EU owners is temporary admission. A non-EU flagged boat, privately used, beneficially owned by a non-EU resident, can circulate in EU waters for 18 months without paying it. Read that sentence again, because every clause in it is a tripwire. Privately used means the moment you charter in EU waters, you're in the VAT system. Beneficially owned by a non-EU resident means if you move or take residency somewhere for family or business reasons, your boat's tax status changes with your passport. 18 months means a clock that has to be reset by physically leaving on schedule with documentation. So the boat's largest single potential liability is not controlled by the boat, the crew, the market, or the weather. It's controlled by your itinerary and your residency. A change in your personal life, a marriage, a relocation, a decision to spend more time in Europe can create a $7 million exposure on an asset that never moved from its birth. The United States plays a gentler version of the same game in reverse. Florida capped sales tax on a boat purchase at $18,000, and that single line of state law is why a meaningful share of the world's large yachts spent their winters in Fort Lauderdale. Now, depreciation, which is the quiet thing eating the whole structure. Real estate can be neglected and still appreciate. A yacht consumes itself continuously and requires enormous spending just to hold position on the value curve. The curve is steepest at the start. A boat delivered new and sold in year 3 often trades 25 to 30% below build cost because the buyer discounts it for being used and because the yards have released newer designs with better layouts. After that, it's a long grind. 10 years out, expect roughly half of what a comparable new build costs, and value doesn't decline smoothly. It falls off calendar edges. As the 5-year class survey approaches, every serious buyer subtracts the estimated cost of that survey and the associated yard time from their offer, so the boat loses several $100,000 of market value on a date, not on a condition. Nothing broke. A number on a certificate got closer. Selling is its own education. There is no exchange for 50-meter yachts and no reliable price discovery. Large yachts sit on brokerage listings for 12 to 24 months on average, and during every one of those months, you pay full running cost, crew, berth, insurance, class, maintenance, to keep the asset in the condition required to sell it. The listing price is not a price. It's an opening position, and your boat's value is effectively set by the least patient seller in your size class. Because one owner who needs out this quarter resets what every buyer believes the segment is worth. You pay 5 to 10% commission on the way out to a broker. Which brings us to where the money in this industry actually lives, and it is not on the water. The yard earns first and earns longest. The build is the beginning of the relationship, not the end of it. Warranty work, annual haul-outs, paint cycles, refits, conversions. A yacht typically generates yard revenue over its lifetime that exceeds what it costs to build. Yards are not selling boats. They're selling 40-year maintenance contracts with a very expensive signing bonus. The broker earns on everything and owns nothing. Commission on the new build, 15% on every charter week, 5 to 10% on the sale. Then the same boat resells in 6 years and the commission is earned again. One hull, an indefinite series of paydays, and zero exposure to crew, fuel, paint, or depreciation. The management company earns a stable annual fee and a purchasing margin, regardless of whether the boat had a good year, because boats don't have good years, owners do. And then there's the berth, which is the most interesting asset in the entire industry. Over the past 2 decades, the global fleet of yachts over 40 meters grew far faster than the number of berths capable of receiving them. Marina construction is limited by coastline, permitting, and politics, and those 3 things do not scale. So in prime Mediterranean ports, long-term berthing rights for large yachts have become scarce, transferable and expensive, real rights that trade for millions and hold or gain value over time. The boat depreciates. The rectangle of water it parks in appreciates. If you want to be in yachting and make money, the historical answer has never been to buy the yacht. So how does yacht ownership actually die? Not dramatically. Almost never through a sinking, a fire, or a grounding, though all 3 happen. It dies through arithmetic. Something changes on land. A divorce, a transaction that didn't close, a health event, a shift in what the family enjoys, or, most commonly and least discussed, the simple fact that the 4th season is not the 1st season, and the novelty of a thing you own has a shorter half-life than the obligations attached to it. Usage drops toward 0. Costs drop to about 80% of full. The crew stays because a yacht without crew deteriorates fast and becomes unsellable. The insurance stays, the class certificates stay, the berth stays, the generators still run. So the boat now costs $3 million a year to not be used, and every one of those dollars is buying nothing but readiness for a trip nobody is planning. Then the listing goes up, then 18 months of what brokers call interest, then a sale at a figure that would have been unthinkable on delivery day. Here's the number that explains the whole industry. Take our $4 million a year, all in. The average large yacht owner spends somewhere between 3 and 6 weeks aboard annually. Call it 30 days, which is generous. That's roughly $130,000 per day of actual use. And a 50-meter yacht, fully crewed, fully provisioned, charters at retail for about $35,000 a day. That comparison is the honest heart of yacht economics. 4 weeks of chartering someone else's boat at the top of the market in the exact weeks you want costs about a quarter of what ownership costs, and someone else carries the crew, the paint, the class survey, the VAT clock, the depreciation, and the eventual sale. On pure economics, ownership loses to chartering by an enormous margin, and everyone in the industry knows it. People still buy. They buy because a chartered boat is set up for whoever pays next, and an owned boat is set up for you. They buy for privacy that cannot be rented, for a floating room where a conversation can happen with no staff who report to anyone else, for the crew who know the family. Ownership purchases availability, control, and discretion. It does not purchase a return, and the owners who last are the ones who never confuse the two. So if you're going to do this, look hard at the shape of the ledger, because the shape matters more than the size. Every large number on it, the crew, the yard, the berth, the insurance, the fuel burning through the night at anchor, is charged for the boat existing, not for you being aboard. The one variable fully under your control is how many days a year you use her, and that variable does not reduce a single line, which means the real question was never whether you can afford the boat. Anyone who can write that check can write that check. The question is, what happens in year 8 on a grey October morning when the yard sends over the repaint quote and you look at a calendar that shows 9 days aboard this season? Whether you are still the person who wants to keep her warm, fueled, crewed, and ready for a summer you may not take, that's the number that decides it, not the purchase price. How long you can go on paying for the version of your life the boat was bought to prove?